Hi everyone, my name is James Feeney. Welcome to or back to my channel. Today we are going to be talking about crystals, specifically their energetic, metaphysical, spiritual properties. I know that this topic is quite subjective and relative depending on what your beliefs are regarding stones and minerals of all sorts. I will say that I am a self-proclaimed skeptic myself, but I did decide to keep crystals on me, specifically certain crystals on my person, for a week and try to observe if I saw any differences or any happenings that seemed out of the ordinary. These are just my personal findings, so take them all with a grain of salt. And if any of them are helpful or entertaining for you, all the better. If not, I hope it can just be a fun sharing of something that I've experienced. So grab a drink of something and sit back, maybe just try to enjoy what I have to say. And if you're interested in crystals, maybe this will be a little bit more informative. But this was something that I partook in, an experiment that I conducted more accidentally at first. It began with a piece of smoky quartz that I put in my pocket just for fun. I know many of us out there are fans of just putting stones in our bags, our pockets, our luggage, our cars. We have crystals everywhere in our community. I would say the tarot community, the spiritual, the witch community. Crystals are quite prevalent. So it's not something that's super uncommon for me, but I did then decide to work very conscientiously with what I saw throughout that day. So going to the grocery store, walking down the street, running errands, going about my day-to-day life. And I tried to compare what I found to be the core attributes of the stone alongside what actually occurred for me. And there were some congruencies, but there were also some differences. And I think the differences are where I learned the most, and I cannot say without a shadow of a doubt that I believe that crystals have properties that are, I would say, outside of just their basic structuring as a mineral. I can't say that for certain, and I'm still uncertain myself, but I will state what I found to be the case. So the first one that I went about using was smoky quartz, and I kept that on me for 2 days straight. I then followed it up with citrine, which I held with me for 2 days as well. And then I went to amethyst, which I used for 2 days as well, finalizing in this clear quartz, which I had on me for 2 days also. This is while I was away, and so I like to think that the objectivity of me being by myself and not in my normal environment lended an interesting element, a sort of variable to this experiment. By no means did this take place in a vacuum. There are so many things to account for. It's impossible to say what was what or what caused what. Correlation is not causation, so this is more fun than anything else. So we'll start with what my findings were when I embarked with the smoky quartz. Now, the things that I thought would happen, I imagined smoky quartz to be very protective. I imagined it to be a little bit more grounding. I imagined it to transmute negative energies or to ward them off. And so for me, this was one I imagined to be more protective and thought that it would put me in a good headspace, would keep me feeling very calm and centered. Now, I won't say that that wasn't the case, but this one I think surprised me the most. I found actually that it made me in some ways almost feel, if I have to put the way I felt those 2 days, and I'm not necessarily saying that the smoky quartz caused it, of course, but I felt almost invisible. Invisible to the world around me and everything that was happening. Nothing really interacted with me unless I went out of my way to interact with it. I will add the caveat that I was taking some active notes as I was, and I don't have them on me, but I can recall them. I was taking active notes as I was working with these crystals about how I was feeling, what was going on around me. And the biggest thing that I found to be was that, yeah, I just felt like I was kind of unseen, and I don't think that's a bad thing, but I did find it funny, and maybe it was just warding off things. Maybe it was just kind of keeping me to myself. So there was something more shy and introspective about smoky quartz that I hadn't previously considered. And I thought that was a very interesting quality to it. I'd be very curious to know, with all of these, what your findings and opinions are. I'm sure depending on how and when you use a crystal, what it is, And of course, what you believe, it's going to be quite different from my experiences, in the same way that if I were to use the same smoky quartz on other occasions in different ways, I am certain the outcomes would be different. But whether it was psychosomatic or something that was just a trick of the mind, that wasn't something I thought would take place, but it was really what happened. So, and I also felt sort of, I wouldn't say sad, but there was a more somber feeling to the days that I had this stone on me. And there wasn't necessarily a reason for that, but it was my overarching mood. So that may have attributed or contributed to the idea of feeling a little bit more invisible or out of view and out of sight. So something that I just found with that one. Now moving on to citrine was the next one that I used and kept with me. I usually associate citrine with abundance, prosperity, uplifted moods, and happiness. It's one that I think is a go-to for like feel good. It's basically, in my mind, a serotonin as a crystal. So I kept this one on me. I will say that I think the citrine had the least obvious effect in my days, and maybe I just wasn't paying attention enough. There wasn't anything particular that stood out. I did find that my mood did rise a bit from my time with the smoky quartz. That may have just been the fact that I got myself out of a bit of a funk, but yeah, there wasn't anything super poignant or revealing about this stone and what it was contributing to my day. I will say though that I did feel a bit better, so maybe it was more of a balancing effect, if anything. I think that to me, in some ways, I imagine it to not necessarily have such an overt effect as much as a subtle one. And of course, these are small pieces of crystal. It'd be difficult to carry around a gigantic obelisk or point or sphere unless I were to like pack it in a backpack. So I did try to make this as convenient as possible. But I will say, if anything, I guess it was more standard in the way that I imagine citrine to function. It was more of that uplifting energy. And yeah, so that to me was a bit obvious. Then I went for this piece of amethyst and kept this on me. I tend to think of amethyst as more of a spiritual stone, one that is quite protective and I would say dreamy in some ways, and I tend to use it sometimes when I'm going to bed. I'll put it on the bedside or under a pillow, or I'm usually keeping it near me when I'm sleeping or ensuring it's near me in that way. But keeping it with me during the daytime, which is not something I commonly do, was pretty interesting. I would say that I did feel like I was in a fog for the days that I had this on me in a bit of a way. Of course, I wasn't going out and about as much, and I did find that I was kind of going out for one reason or another, whether it was errands or because I had something I needed to do when I was working with the smoky quartz and the citrine. So being at home, of course, lends itself more to that foggy state where you can easily drift off and daydream, but it also is associated with my ideas of what amethyst does. So it kind of, I guess my choices reflected what amethyst tends to lend itself to. So if anything, I think it did more so exactly what I thought it would do. And I did keep it by me during sleep time and on my bed, both of the nights that I was using or keeping this stone on me. And I do tend to find that when amethyst is near me, maybe it is, again, one of those psychosomatic type things where my thoughts are impacting what I choose to do or how my mind functions. But I do find that my dreams are a lot more vivid when I have an amethyst near me. And I found that the dreams that I had rolling into the next day were very pertinent to whatever was going on, and that I was able to recall the dream a lot more vividly. And throughout the day, random bits of my dreams would kind of surface. And so for me, it definitely affirmed its spot as more of a dream state stone, or one that I would use to kind of dabble in the idea of what dream work is, at least to me. So let me know if that's something that any of you out there do. And then finally, I ended on this clear quartz point, this little rough point. And for me, clear quartz is really about the idea of amplification. It's very neutral, and I think something about it is just meant to like turn the dial up a little bit. So there's not necessarily a quality or property that I would assign to clear quartz aside from amplification. And so in my head, before I had this one on me and I was starting to make a lot of observations on the other crystals, I was anticipating that this would maybe bolster any moods or activities that I was trying to engage in. I will say with this one, it felt like I was pushing myself a little bit too far on these days. I will say that the week that I was going about these crystals, I was having a bit of a rougher time, and so that was really the reason that I decided to try this. So my mental emotional state was already a bit different from the norm. So there's another variable to throw into the mix that may throw off this experiment. But I did find that it was actually really difficult having the clear quartz on me. I did think that it was harder to avoid the things that I maybe tried to suppress or circumvent and just try to get around and not acknowledge. So if anything, this felt like it was bringing things to the surface that, whether I wanted to or not, had to then eventually address. And ultimately, I think that's helpful, but it was also quite disruptive. And I've never considered clear quartz to be a very revealing or disruptive stone in that way. Maybe it's just how I was feeling and the way it was operating during that time. Again, I am a skeptic, so I don't know if any of these crystals, and I won't say that I entirely believe that they've done something to me when they're on me or when I use them even in my magical workings. I like to think they do, but I'm still, the jury's still out on that one. So that's really the feeling I got from the clear quartz, and that was a bit different from the norm. So I would say the smoky quartz and the clear quartz seemed to have effects that I didn't anticipate as much, whereas the amethyst and the citrine did have more of, I would say, the standard effect of what I imagined them to potentially add to my day and affect me. So there's that. And I'm not sure how interesting or fun that was. I thought it would be a nice thing to share. I've seen on TikTok recently this trend. I've seen Moldavite everywhere on TikTok. I'm new to TikTok, and I don't have one where I'm posting tarot things, but if I do, I will let you all know. But I've seen Moldavite be quite the hot topic, and those who it seems like are kind of dipping their toes in the ideas of spiritual practices and metaphysical workings are seeking out Moldavite like crazy, which is quite expensive. So yeah, but side note from that, I've seen that quite a bit, and then I've also seen the results of what Moldavite has maybe done to, or the effect that it's had on the person, being extremely disruptive and causing a lot of chaos in a person's life. And I guess tying this into my personal experiment, I think that when we open ourselves up to the idea of something, when we are susceptible, when we intentionally make ourselves susceptible to an idea or a topic or an energy, I think that change happens when we invite and are susceptible to it, when we ask for it. And clearly when one carries a stone looking for it to have an effect on you, you are then opening oneself up, I'm opening myself up to effects of something outside of myself. And if that's something that you aren't familiar with or you haven't done much of in your life, if that's a new practice for you, regardless of crystals, just opening yourself up to something that is outside of yourself having an effect on you, where you aren't trying to micromanage or control what's going on or actively participate. I think there's going to be an element that is quite disruptive when one allows themselves to enter that state, whether the crystal is Moldavite, clear quartz, rose quartz, what have you. And so I think the act of just allowing oneself to be open to external forces can be transformative. I also think it's something to be done with care and to understand what may occur when you decide to put yourself in such a state where you, are open and susceptible and maybe more passive to, or receptive, I should say, to active elements going on in the world around you and what that may incur. I just thought I would share my 2 cents on that. I hope you are all doing well. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed this kind of chatty ramble, and until next time, bye.